Welcome to episode 4 of the Peloton Princess podcast, where we challenge the narratives, reconnect with our roots, and reclaim the truth. The late, great Dr. Delbert Blair once shared that the St. Louis Arch is a portal, and many wonderful, notable people were born from the city. Maya Angelou, Solana, or SZA, and me. Born in St. Louis, Missouri, raised in Memphis, Tennessee, these two cities deeply entwined with Indigenous history and untold stories. Today, we're diving into a topic that shakes the very foundation of what many of us have been taught about our identity. I know for me specifically. For generations, we've been taught that our ancestors were stolen from Africa and brought here against their will, that our lineage begins with slavery. But what if I told you that for many of us, that's only part of the story? The story was told in reverse, or that's not our story at all. Shout out to Dane Calloway and the legendary Top Cats, and also Rod Hayes. Our roots run deeper right here in the lands of North and South America than we've been led to believe. In this episode, we're reclaiming the Indigenous American Indian identity that has been hidden in plain sight. We'll explore Mound and Cahokia, the advanced civilization that existed long before colonization, and how its legacy connects to those of us from St. Louis, Memphis, Tennessee, and beyond. We'll also break down how history was rewritten, how Indigenous people were reclassified, and why it's time to reconnect to our true heritage. If you've ever driven across the Mississippi River from St. Louis into Illinois, you may have passed a place that holds one of the greatest secrets in American history, Cahokia. Just across the river sits Monk's Mound, the largest pre-Columbian earthwork in North America. This mound isn't just a pile of dirt. It's the remains of a massive indigenous city that once held a population larger than London at its peak. Cahokia was built by the Mississippian civilization between 900 and 1200 AD, and Monk's Mound was at its heart, rising over 100 feet and covering about 14 acres. This was a political and spiritual center, likely the residence of a ruling chief or a sacred space for ceremonial practices. Imagine that before European colonization, before America as we know it, there was a thriving metropolis here, created by Indigenous people who had advanced social structures, trade networks, and engineering skills that rivaled civilizations across the world. But here's the part they don't teach us in school. Many of us who identify as Black or Nubian today are actually descendants of these original people. Our ancestors didn't just arrive here on slave ships. They were actually already here, building, thriving, and sustaining civilizations like Cahokia. This history connects us back to the land in ways we've made to forget. So if our ancestors were already here, why don't we identify as Indigenous today? Why are so many of us only told we're descendants of Africa when many people I know in my family have said we got Indians in our family? The answer lies in systematic erasure and reclassification. During colonization and throughout the 19th and early 20th centuries, Indigenous American Indians were intentionally reclassified on government records or the Dawes rolls. That's where you get your $5 Indian from. Many Native people, especially those with darker skin, were labeled as Negro, Black, mulatto, or even colored on census records. This wasn't by accident. It was a calculated move to strip us of our land erase our tribal affiliations, and assimilate us into a new racial category that suited colonial expansion. Think about it. If indigenous people no longer existed on paper, their land could be taken, their sovereignty erased. The U.S. government passed laws like the Indian Removal Act of 1830, forcing tribes off their land and onto reservations. But many indigenous people refused to leave and instead blended into Black communities. Over generations, the knowledge of who we were was deliberately buried. This is why many of our elders have stories of Indian great-grandmothers and great-grandfathers, yet we were told to forget about it. Schools, churches, and the media fed us a singular narrative that we all came from Africa, period. And while African ancestry is absolutely part of our history, for many of us, it's not the whole story. We are the indigenous people of this land. So what does this mean for us today? How do we begin to reconnect with our indigenous roots? First, it starts with researching our family history or our genealogy. Many of our elders still hold pieces of the truth, stories of ancestors who lived off the land, spoke native languages, or identified as Indian before being forced to adopt new identities. Start asking questions. Look at old census records, family Bibles, oral histories. Second, we have to reclaim our connection to the land and to nature and to Daughter Earth, as Sister Myra would say. Understanding sites like Monk's Mound reminds us that we come from a lineage of builders, leaders, and innovators. Visiting these sacred places, learning about the Mississippian culture, and recognizing that this is part of our heritage is very powerful. And third, we need to tell the truth loudly. The more we speak about our indigenous identity, the more we undo the erasure. Whether through storytelling, educating our communities, passing this knowledge on to our children, or embracing traditional practices, every step we take to acknowledge our real history is a step towards reclaiming what we lost. Because here's the reality. Our identity was never truly lost. It was just hidden. And we were lied to. And now it's time to bring it back into the light. This episode has been about more than just history. It's been about identity, legacy, and reclaiming what's ours. Monk's Mound and Cahokia and our indigenous roots are reminders that we belong to this land, not just as survivors, but as descendants of the original caretakers. So, I challenge you, start asking the questions, start digging deeper, and most importantly, start seeing yourself for who you truly are. Thank you for tuning in to today's episode. If this conversation resonated with you, share it, continue the discussion, go talk to your grandparents, your great aunts, your great uncles, and the elders in your family. And let's keep reclaiming our stories. Until next time, take care and stay rooted in truth.